Hold your breath, or he dies, the bodyguard hissed, pressing cold steel against my neck. On my kitchen table lay a man in a charcoal suit, his life leaking onto my linoleum floor. I was a nurse, not a miracle worker, but the look in the dying man's eyes wasn't fear. It was a command. The storm outside hammered against my small South Side apartment, but inside, the silence was heavy with the scent of copper and expensive cologne. My brother, Andre, stood in the corner, trembling. He was the one who had brought this trouble to my door, babbling about a debt and a man he found bleeding in an alley. I looked at the man on the table. He was Korean, built like an athlete, with features so sharp they looked sculpted from stone. Even as his life force ebbed away, he didn't blink. His charcoal suit, worth more than my 4-year degree, was ruined. "Andre, get my sewing kit," I whispered, my voice steadier than I felt. "And the bottle of vodka from the freezer." The bodyguard, a mountain of a man with a scarred brow, didn't lower his gun. "Move faster, nurse. If his heart stops, yours stops next." I ignored him. I had to. In the ER, they teach you to tune out the noise, but tuning out a 9mm at your temple was a new level of pressure. I ripped open the man's silk shirt. The bullet had entered just below the ribs. It was deep. I could see the rhythmic spurt of an arterial nick. "I need light," I barked. Andre held a flickering flashlight over the wound. I poured the vodka over the needle and thread, then directly into the wound. The man, Jin-ho, didn't scream. He didn't even groan. Instead, his hand shot out, his fingers locking around my wrist with the strength of a dying sun. His skin was scorching, his eyes boring into mine. "Do it," he rasped. His voice was a low, melodic growl that vibrated in my chest. "No. Anesthesia. I need to stay awake." "You'll go into shock," I argued, trying to pry his hand off. "Do it." I began the work. It was barbaric. Without proper clamps, I had to use my own fingers to hold the vessel shut while I threaded the needle. Every time the steel pierced his flesh, I felt him shudder, but he never let go of my wrist. I was stitching a ghost back into his body using fishing line and sheer desperation. Minutes turned into an eternity. Sweat stung my eyes. Finally, the bleeding stopped. I bandaged him with clean dish towels and tape. I was exhausted, my scrubs soaked in the blood of a stranger. "He needs a hospital," I said, looking at the bodyguard. The man didn't answer. He scooped Jin-ho up as if he weighed nothing. Jin-ho's eyes stayed on mine until the very moment the door closed. They left as quickly as they came, leaving my kitchen looking like a slaughterhouse. I collapsed into a chair, crying silently as Andre apologized over and over. I didn't sleep. I just scrubbed the floor until my hands were raw. By sunrise, the sun hit the kitchen counter, illuminating something I hadn't seen. A heavy, ancient-looking gold coin sat where Jin-ho's head had been. I took it to a pawnshop by noon, expecting a few $100. The jeweler's eyes nearly popped out. "Where did you get this? This is a sovereign piece. It's worth, well, it's worth your entire mortgage, miss." I walked out with a cashier's check that wiped my debt clean. I thought I was free. I thought I'd never see those dark eyes again. The sterile smell of St. Jude's Hospital usually felt like home. Today, it felt like a tomb. As I walked through the sliding glass doors, I didn't see the usual bustling energy of the morning shift. I saw Nurse Henderson, the head nurse, standing with 2 police officers near the central station. Henderson was a woman who wore her ego like a badge. She had hated me since the day I pointed out she'd nearly administered a lethal dose of potassium to a patient in room 402. She was old guard, and I was the South Side upstart who moved too fast for her liking. "There she is," Henderson said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "I'm so sorry, Maya. I tried to tell them it must be a mistake, but the evidence, it's just so damning." "What are you talking about?" I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. One of the officers stepped forward. "Maya, Brian, we received an anonymous tip about a narcotics theft. We searched your staff locker this morning. We found 6 vials of hospital-grade morphine and 3 bottles of oxycodone hidden in your gym bag." "That's impossible," I gasped. "I don't even have a key to the secondary narcotics cabinet. Only the head nurse does." Henderson stepped closer, her eyes glittering with a cold triumph. "We all know your brother has history, Maya. We assumed you were doing it to pay off his debts. It's a tragedy, really. You were so talented." "You framed me," I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. "You're the only one who could have planted those. You used your master key." "Watch your tone," the officer snapped. "We have the bag. We have the logs. You're coming with us." They didn't even let me get my stethoscope. They handcuffed me in front of the entire surgical team. I saw the interns I had trained looking away in shame. I saw the patients I had stayed up all night with whispering as I was led out. Henderson leaned in as the officers turned me toward the exit. "You're done, Maya. Not just here. I've already sent a formal report to the state board. You'll never hold a needle again in this country. Go back to the gutter where you belong." The next 48 hours were a blur of cold cells and a public defender who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Because the theft was high value, the hospital pushed for a permanent blacklist. Even though the charges were eventually dropped for insufficient video evidence, the damage was done. I was a high-risk nurse. No hospital would touch me. My license was suspended pending an investigation that could take years. I sat in my apartment staring at the paid-off mortgage papers. I had a house, but no career. I had saved a monster's life, and in return, the universe had destroyed mine. I spent a week applying for everything: home health, school nursing, even veterinary clinics. Every time they saw my name, the door slammed shut. Finally, a notification popped up on a high-end recruitment app. Private medical care. High-profile client. 50,000 per month. Discretion mandatory. I didn't care if it was a trap. I didn't care if it was sketchy. I was a week away from losing my utilities. I dressed in my best professional suit, pinned my hair back, and headed to the north side, to a skyscraper made of black glass and steel that touched the clouds. The office was a cathedral of power. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a Chicago that looked like a toy set from this height. But my eyes were locked on the man standing behind the mahogany desk. He wasn't the bleeding, desperate animal I had, stitched together on my linoleum floor. He was a god of industry. His charcoal suit was perfectly tailored, his hair swept back, his posture radiating a terrifying authority. "You're late, nurse," Jinho whispered. The sound of his voice triggered a phantom pain in my wrist, the place where he had gripped me while I sewed his skin. "You," I breathed, clutching my resume to my chest. "You're the CEO of Lewis International? You're a businessman?" Jinho walked around the desk. Every step was deliberate, silent. He stopped just inches from me. I could smell the same cologne from that night, but now it was mixed with the scent of expensive ink and old money. I am many things, Maya, he said, his eyes scanning my face with an intensity that made me want to bolt. But currently, I am a man with a very expensive problem. My previous medical team was compromised. I find myself in need of someone who can work under pressure, someone who doesn't ask questions, someone who knows how to use a fishing line when things get messy. I stood my ground, though my knees felt like water. You're the reason I lost my job. You and your men, that gold coin you left. It paid my house, but it flagged me. Henderson used the chaos of that night to frame me because she knew I was distracted. Jinho's expression didn't change, but his eyes darkened. I am aware of Nurse Henderson. I am aware of everything that has happened to you in the last 14 days. Why do you think you were the only one who received the notification for this job? I narrowed my eyes. You've been watching me. I protect my investments, he said coolly. He reached into his desk and pulled out a leather-bound folder. He slid it across the desk toward me. That is a 5-year contract, $10 million, full medical equipment at your disposal. You will live in the east wing of my estate. You will be my shadow. 10 million. My voice cracked. For nursing? That's not a salary. That's a bribe. It's a retainer, Jinho corrected. The people who tried to kill me in your kitchen are still out there. They are looking for me, and eventually they will look for the woman who kept me alive. This contract isn't just for your skills, Maya. It's for your life. I looked at the contract. It was my ticket out of the gutter. It was my chance to show Henderson that she hadn't broken me. But I knew what this meant. I wasn't just joining a medical team. I was joining a war. I have conditions, I said, looking him in the eye. I am a doctor in my wing. My word is law when it comes to your health. And if I find out you're using me for something illegal, I walk. Jinho let out a short, dry laugh. He leaned in, his face inches from mine. You're a nurse with a spine. I like that. But let's be clear, Maya. You didn't walk into a hospital today. You walked into my world. And in my world, there is no walking away. He handed me a pen. It was heavy, solid gold. As I signed my name, I felt the weight of the decision. I was no longer Maya Bryan, the South Side nurse. I was the private medic to the Ghost King of Chicago. The Gold Coast Charity Gala was an ocean of silk, diamonds, and snobbery. I felt like an exposed nerve. Jinho had insisted I attend, not in my scrubs, but in a gown the color of midnight. He hadn't asked. He'd simply had a team of stylists descend upon my wing of the estate like a whirlwind. Now, standing in the marble ballroom, the weight of the emerald necklace around my neck felt heavier than my medical bag. Stay close, Jinho murmured. He looked devastating in a tuxedo, his arm tucked firmly around mine. He wasn't just presenting me as his doctor. He was presenting me as a mystery the elite were dying to solve. The whispers started the moment we entered. I heard them like white noise. Who is she? A South Side nobody. I heard she was a fired nurse. Then came the collision. Eleanor, the woman from the office, the daughter of a shipping magnate and Jinho's self-appointed fiancé, blocked our path. She was flanked by 3 other socialites, all of them looking at me like I was a smudge on a clean floor. Jinho, darling, Eleanor purred, her eyes raking over my dress with visible disgust. I see you're still playing charity, but really, bringing the help to a black tie event? It's a bit tacky, don't you think? I felt the familiar heat of South Side anger rising in my throat, but I kept my face a mask of professional calm. I was a nurse. I dealt with worse than a jealous girl with a trust fund. "She isn't help, Eleanor," Jinho said, his voice dropping an octave. The air around us seemed to chill. "Oh, please," Eleanor laughed, turning to the crowd of onlookers. "Let's call it what it is. She's a disgraced nurse who got caught stealing drugs. She's probably here to see if any of the guests have loose jewelry or a prescription pad they aren't watching." The surrounding guests gasped. One woman even pulled her clutch closer to her chest. Eleanor smirked, leaning in toward me. "Why don't you be a good little girl and go find the kitchen? I'm sure they need someone to scrub the floors. It's more your speed than a gala." I felt Jinho's grip on my waist tighten, his knuckles turning white. He was a second away from a public execution, but I stepped forward first. I didn't need a gun to win this. "Actually, Eleanor," I said, my voice projecting clearly through the hall, "I was just noticing the slight yellowing in the whites of your eyes and the faint tremor in your hand. Based on your symptoms and the way you're clutching that champagne, I'd say your liver is currently begging for a break. As a disgraced nurse, I'd recommend you put the glass down before you collapse on this very expensive rug. It would be a shame to stain the silk." The room went dead silent. Eleanor's face turned a mottled purple. "How dare you? Enough!" Jinho's voice cut through the air like a guillotine. He stepped into the light, pulling me flush against his side. "Listen carefully, all of you. Maya Bryan is not the help. She is my personal physician, the woman who saved my life, and tonight she is my guest of honor. If any of you have a problem with her presence, you have a problem with Lewis International, and we all know how I handle problems." He turned to the host of the gala, a man who looked ready to faint. "Cancel my donation for the evening. It seems this room isn't as refined as I was led to believe." As Jinho led me away, Elena stood frozen, the subject of every mocking whisper she had tried to start. The face slap was complete, but I knew the war was just beginning. The tension in the air was so thick it felt like a physical weight. Eleanor's brother Marcus stood with a practiced predatory smile, holding out the porcelain cup. Jinho reached for it, his mind likely on the business merger he needed Marcus's father for. But as the cup moved through the air, I caught a scent. It wasn't the earthy aroma of oolong. It was a faint, bitter whiff, like crushed almonds. Cyanide. My medical training screamed. In the ER, you learn to trust your nose as much as your eyes. My heart hammered. If I shouted, Marcus would have his men open fire. If I let Jinho drink, he'd be dead before his head hit the floor. "Wait," I said, my voice light but firm. I reached out and caught Jinho's wrist just as the rim touched his lips. Jinho looked at me, a question in his dark eyes. Marcus's smile didn't falter, but I saw the slight twitch in his jaw. "Is something wrong, nurse?" Marcus asked. "Is the tea not to your liking?" "Actually," I said, taking the cup from Jinho's hand. "In my culture, it's considered bad luck for the guest to drink before the host has proved the quality of the brew, especially a brew as unique as this one." I turned the cup toward Marcus. "You've been talking all night about how this tea is a family treasure. Why don't you show us? A toast to the new alliance." Marcus stepped back, his eyes darting to the security guards at the door. "I've already had my fill for the evening. Don't be ridiculous." "I insist," Jinho said. He had caught the change in my energy. He stepped closer to Marcus, his height intimidating, his hand moving toward the inside of his jacket. My doctor is very particular about what I consume. If she says you should drink first, Marcus, you should drink." The socialites nearby began to murmur. The pressure in the room was shifting. Marcus was trapped. To refuse was to admit the poison. To drink was to die. "It's a simple cup of tea, Marcus," I whispered, holding it out to him. "Unless, of course, there's something in here that doesn't belong." Marcus's hand shook. He looked at the cup, then at Jinho's cold, expectant gaze. Desperation took over. He grabbed the cup, but instead of drinking, he tried to throw the liquid into my face. Jinho moved like a shadow. He caught Marcus's arm mid-air, twisting it until the bone groaned. The tea splashed onto the white tablecloth, and within seconds, the fabric began to hiss and turn a charred, sickly brown. The screams erupted instantly. The guests scrambled back as the peace offering ate through the table. "Cyanide mixed with a concentrated acid," I noted, my voice cold. "A bit overkill, don't you think, Marcus?" Jinho didn't say a word. He slammed Marcus face first into the ruined table, inches away from the corrosive liquid. "You tried to poison me in front of my woman," Jinho hissed. "Tell your father the North Side is now a war zone, and tell him he's losing." He grabbed my hand and led me out of the gala, the sound of Marcus's whimpering fading behind us. We reached the car, the adrenaline finally starting to fade into a cold shiver. The luxury of the Maybach felt like a cage. I stared at the screen, watching Andre's chest heave with terrified sobs. He had always been the weak link, the one I had to protect, the one I had stayed a nurse for. And now my association with Jinho had put a target on his back. "Maya, look at me," Jinho commanded. He took the phone from my shaking hands and ended the call. "They have him," I choked out. "The Blue Tigers. They're going to kill him because of me, because I saved you." Jinho didn't offer comfort. He didn't offer a hug. He pulled out a second phone and began barking orders in Korean. "Deploy the hounds. I want every blue tiger nest in the city identified. Now." "Jinho, they said 1 hour," I pleaded. "I have to go to them. I'm the one they want. I have the medical knowledge they need to stabilize their leader." Jinho turned to me, his eyes like polished flint. "You are not going anywhere. You are my doctor. You are under my protection. If you walk into that trap, I lose my best asset and my heart in the same breath. I don't lose, Maya." "He's my brother," I screamed, hitting his chest. "You don't understand family. You only understand power." Jinho grabbed my wrists, pinning them to his chest. His heart was beating fast, not with fear, but with a cold, focused rage. "I understand that they took him to get to you, and because they took him, I am going to burn their world to ash. You want your brother? Then watch how a king handles a rebellion." We arrived at a hidden warehouse on the edge of the docks. The air smelled of salt and rust. Jinho's private army was already there, a sea of black tactical gear and silenced rifles. "Stay in the car," Jinho ordered. "No," I said, grabbing my trauma kit. "If he's hurt, he'll need me immediately. And if your men get hit, you'll need me too. I'm going in." Jinho stared at me for a long beat. Then he handed me a small, sleek pistol. "Keep it on safety, unless they touch you. If they touch you, aim for the center of the chest. It's the biggest target." The breach was silent and deadly. Jinho moved through the warehouse like a ghost, his suppressed weapon spitting fire with surgical precision. I followed behind, my heart in my throat, stepping over the fallen bodies of men who had made the mistake of kidnapping a Brian. We reached the back office. The door was kicked open. Andre was there, slumped in the chair, but he wasn't alone. The Blue Tiger leader, a man known as the Butcher, had a gun to Andre's head. "One more step, Lewis, and the boy's brains decorate the wall," the Butcher roared. Jin-Ho didn't stop. He walked into the center of the room, his gun lowered. "You think I care about the boy? He's a thief and a liability. I'm here for the disrespect." The Butcher laughed, his finger tightening on the trigger. "Then watch him die." Crack. The sound didn't come from the Butcher's gun. It came from the rafters. One of Jin-Ho's snipers had taken the shot. The Butcher's hand exploded in a spray of red, his gun clattering to the floor. I rushed forward, sliding across the concrete to get to Andre. I sliced his zip ties and pulled him into my arms. He was alive, bruised, but breathing. Jin-Ho walked over to the screaming Butcher. He didn't shoot him. He looked at me. "Doctor, is he going to live?" I looked at the Butcher's mangled hand. "He'll live, but he'll never use that hand again." Jin-Ho nodded, then looked back at the Butcher. "Hear that? You'll live. Just long enough to tell me where the rest of your kin are hiding. Because today, the Blue Tigers become extinct." The world was a blur of screeching tires and shattering glass. I shoved Andre into the footwell of the SUV as Jin-Ho's weight slumped against me. The blood was dark, almost black in the shadows of the car, spreading across his tactical vest with terrifying speed. "Drive! Don't you dare stop!" I screamed at the driver as a hail of bullets sparked against the reinforced frame of the vehicle. I ripped open Jin-Ho's vest. The bullet had entered his side, just below the ribs, the exact same area I had stitched 2 weeks ago. But this wasn't a clean entry. The exit wound was jagged, and he was hemorrhaging. "Jin-Ho, stay with me." I grabbed his face, forcing him to look at me. His eyes were unfocused, his breathing shallow and wet. "Maya," he wheezed, his hand feebly grasping for mine. The bag, the floor. I reached down, grabbing my trauma kit. The SUV swerved violently as we took a corner on 2 wheels. I was thrown against the door, my head slamming into the glass. But I didn't let go of the kit. I didn't have a sterile OR. I didn't have a nurse to pass me tools. I had a vibrating floorboard and a dying man. "Andre, hold his shoulders," I commanded. My brother crawled up, his face pale with terror, and pinned Jin-Ho down. I didn't have time for elegance. I dumped a bottle of antiseptic over the wound and my own hands. I reached into the wound with my forceps, the car bouncing over a curb. My fingers felt the hot, slick metal of the bullet lodged against his spine. If I moved a millimeter the wrong way, he'd never walk again. If I didn't move fast enough, his heart would stop. "Hold him steady," I yelled, as another SUV rammed us from the side. The metal groaned. Glass rained down on us. I felt the bullet move. With a sharp tug, I pulled the lead fragment out. A geyser of blood followed. I shoved my finger into the hole, manual pressure being the only thing keeping his soul in his body. "I need the cautery pen." I reached into the bag, found the device, and pressed it into the wound. The smell of burning flesh filled the car, a sickening scent that made Andre gag. Jin-Ho's body arched, a silent scream caught in his throat before he went limp. "He's not breathing," Andre shrieked. "Shut up and hold the light." I grabbed the ambu bag, forcing air into Jin-Ho's lungs. 1,000, 1,000. I was a machine. I wasn't his lover. I wasn't his help. I was the barrier between him and the grave. Finally, a ragged, Gasping breath broke from his lips. His heart rhythm stabilized. I stitched the wound shut with a staple gun, my hands covered in the blood of the man who owned half of Chicago. The SUV finally screeched to a halt inside a hidden underground bunker. The doors flew open and a team of medics rushed forward with a gurney. They tried to push me aside, but I stood my ground. I performed a field cauterization and staple closure. I snapped at the lead surgeon. He's stable, but he needs a unit of O negative and an immediate scan for spinal fragments. Move. The surgeon, a man with 30 years of experience, looked at me, covered in blood, hair matted, eyes blazing, and nodded. Yes, doctor. Immediately. As they wheeled him away, I collapsed against the cold concrete wall. My brother sat beside me, looking at me like I was a stranger. Maya, you saved the king. The image of Henderson on the screen was a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. She wasn't a hostage. She was standing there with a stethoscope around her neck and a cold, triumphant smile, flanked by men in tiger-striped masks. She had transitioned from a jealous bully to a high-level traitor. Maya Bryan, Henderson's voice echoed through the speakers, direct and chilling. I know you're watching. You saved your master, but you left your colleagues to die. You have 2 hours to turn yourself over to the South City docks, or I start making medical errors with every patient in the ICU. The bunker went silent. Jin Ho's lieutenants turned to look at me. To them, I was just a woman. To Henderson, I was the only witness to her crimes. You can't go, Andre whispered, clutching my arm. It's a trap, Maya. They'll kill you the second you arrive. I'm not going to surrender, I said, my voice sounding like someone else's, colder, harder. I'm going to work. I walked into the recovery room where Jin Ho was waking up. He was pale, hooked to a dozen monitors, but the moment I entered, his eyes snapped open. You're not leaving, he rasped, his hand searching for mine. I have to, Jin Ho. She's using my hospital, my patients. If I don't stop her, their blood is on my hands. She's a pawn, Jin Ho said, coughing painfully. The Blue Tigers, they're using her to draw me out. If you go, they win. Then we change the game, I said, leaning over him. I know how she thinks. She thinks I'm a lowly nurse who only knows how to follow orders. She doesn't know that I've been studying her for years. I know her malpractice history. I know where she hides her files. And I know the syndicate board is meeting tonight to decide who to support in this war. I looked at Jin Ho's lead lieutenant. Get me a secure link to the syndicate board. I'm going to perform a different kind of surgery tonight. I'm going to cut the cancer out of this organization. An hour later, I was on a high-definition video call with the 12 most powerful criminals in the city. They looked at me with disdain, a woman in blood-stained scrubs. You waste our time, girl, one said. We are here to discuss territory, not nursing. Then let's talk about territory, I said, sliding a digital file onto the shared screen. Nurse Henderson isn't just a disgruntled employee. These are her offshore accounts. She's been receiving payments from the Russian cartel to weaken the syndicate's medical infrastructure. She's been poisoning your own men in the hospitals for months. Look at the mortality rates for routine surgeries in the last year. The board members began scrolling through the data. Their faces shifted from boredom to lethal fury. She's been killing our soldiers under your nose, I continued. And she's doing it right now at St. Jude's. If you support her, You're supporting the people who want to replace you. And what do you want? The elder asked. I want her life, I said. And I want my hospital back. The room moved with a sudden, violent energy. Jinho had ripped his IV out and was standing, draped in a black coat, his face a mask of lethal intent. We're going in, he growled. No, I stopped him, my hand on his chest. If you go in as a mafia boss, they'll blow the building. But if we go in as a legal union, under the protection of the board, they can't touch us without starting an international war. The elder's voice came through the comms. She's right. Under syndicate law, a fiancé of a king is untouchable during a negotiation. Jinho, if you claim her as your future queen, we can provide a diplomatic escort into the hospital. Jinho looked at me. The air between us was electric. This wasn't just a legal maneuver. It was a surrender of his most guarded secret. Maya, if we do this, there is no going back. The world will hunt you as they hunt me. They're already hunting me, Jinho, I said, taking his hand. Let's give them something to see. 20 minutes later, a fleet of black Rolls-Royces pulled up to the front of St. Jude's Hospital. Not the back entrance, the front. Under the glare of 100 news cameras and police spotlights, Jinho stepped out first, looking every bit the billionaire CEO. Then he reached back and took my hand. I was dressed in a pristine white doctor's coat, but on my finger was a black diamond the size of a postage stamp, the syndicate's engagement stone. The blue tiger guards at the door lowered their weapons in confusion. The diplomatic escort, 100 armed men in suits, surrounded us. We are here for a medical inspection, Jinho announced to the cameras, his voice echoing. And to introduce my fiancé, the new chief of medicine for this facility. We walked through the lobby. The staff were huddled in corners, but when they saw me, hope flickered in their eyes. We reached the ICU. Henderson was waiting, the syringe still poised over the old man's IV. Her eyes went to my finger, and her jaw dropped. A ring? You? He would never marry a peasant like you. It's not just a ring, Henderson, I said, stepping forward. It's a warrant. The board has seen your files. They know about the Russian payments. They know you've been over-medicating the elders. You have no proof, she shrieked. Actually, I said, pointing to the ceiling. I had the IT team reactivate the hidden surgical cameras you turned off. Every word you just said to the Blue Tigers was recorded and sent to the police. You're not a nurse anymore. You're a terrorist. The doors behind us burst open. The police, backed by Jinho's legal team, flooded the room. Henderson tried to plunge the syringe into the IV, but I was faster. I grabbed her wrist, twisting it with a strength I didn't know I had until the needle snapped. You're fired, I whispered. The sirens outside St. Jude's weren't just for Henderson. They were for me. As the blue and red lights strobed against the sterile walls of the ICU, my tablet pinged with the leaked file. Henderson's final spite, a distorted medical record claiming I had stolen organs from a thug to save my brother years ago. It was a lie, a fabrication designed to strip my license and put me in a cage alongside her. Maya, we have to go. The back exit is clear, Andre urged, his face pale as he watched the tactical teams assemble outside. I looked at Jinho. He was still weak from surgery, leaning against a heart monitor, but his hand was already on his sidearm. I'll kill them all before they touch you, Maya. This engagement isn't just for show. You are a Lewis now. No, I said, my voice as cold as a surgical blade. If you start a war with the police, we lose everything. I'm a nurse. I don't use bullets to solve problems. I use science. I turned to the lead officer entering the room. Commander Vance, a man known to be on the Blue Tiger's payroll. He held a pair of handcuffs. Maya Bryan, you're under arrest for medical malpractice and conspiracy. Hands behind your back. Commander, before you do that, you might want to look at your own hand, I said calmly. Vance paused, looking down at his palm. A faint, blue-black vein was tracing its way up his wrist. His eyes widened. What is this? What did you do? I didn't do anything, I lied smoothly, stepping closer. But Henderson did. She's been testing a bioagent on the Blue Tiger's soldiers. You've been working with them for weeks, haven't you? You're a carrier now. In about 60 seconds, your respiratory system will begin to seize. It's called the silent paralysis. I'm the only one in this room who knows the antidote. The room went still. Vance's hand began to shake. He tried to raise his gun, but his fingers wouldn't follow his brain's commands. He slumped against the doorframe, gasping for air. His men hesitated, looking at their commander in terror. "Help me," Vance wheezed, his face turning a sickly grey. "Drop the charges," I commanded, "and give me the names of every officer on the Tiger's payroll, or stay there and wait for the paralysis to reach your heart. Do it. Give her everything," Vance choked out to his lieutenant. While the police scrambled to comply, I leaned in. I didn't actually poison him. I had simply noticed he was wearing a nicotine patch that had reacted with the industrial cleaning fumes in the ICU, causing a minor allergic reaction. But in the world of the Mafia, perception is reality. I gave him a quick injection of Benadryl, my antidote, and watched as his breathing returned to normal. "The files are sent," the lieutenant whispered, trembling. "We're leaving." The police retreated, dragging their disgraced commander with them. The hospital was silent. The Blue Tigers were dismantled. Henderson was in a cell. Jin Ho walked over to me, his steps more stable now. He looked at the black diamond on my finger, then into my eyes. "That stunt with the commander. That wasn't in the contract." "The contract is over, Jin Ho," I said, looking at the man who had turned my world upside down. "I saved you. I saved my brother. I saved my hospital. I don't owe you anything anymore." The Ghost King of Chicago, a man who had never bowed to anyone, slowly sank to one knee in the middle of the ICU. He didn't look like a CEO or a mafia boss. He looked like a man who had finally found something worth keeping. "You're right," he whispered. "The contract is dead. I don't want a medic. I don't want a shadow. I want the queen. I want the woman who can bring an army to its knees with a syringe and a smile." He took my hand, his thumb stroking the ring. "I bought the building next to your hospital. It's a research center, yours to run. No syndicate, no secrets, just you. But I want to be the one you come home to every night. Will you stay for real?" I looked at Andre, who was finally smiling. I looked at the staff, who were already cleaning up the lobby. Then I looked at Jin Ho. "I have one condition," I said, pulling him up. "Anything." From now on, I smirked. "I'm the one who gives the orders." Jin Ho laughed, a sound of pure, unadulterated relief, and pulled me into a kiss that tasted like victory and a brand new beginning.